I'm very pleased today to be here with Sean Leach, Director of ANZ Enviro. Hi, Sean.
Hi Joe, how are you?
Good, always good to catch up.
Likewise, yeah.
Well, Sean, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and the work that ANZ Enviro do?
Yeah, certainly. I've been involved in the asbestos and hazardous material remediation industry for approximately 30 years. My business partner Steve has probably 20 years under his experience, under his belt. We both come out of the UK. I was involved in the remediation industry from basically inception when it started, and it's grown globally into what it is today. Certainly for the last 10 years, myself and Steve have headed up ANZ Enviro, working in and across Australia and more recently in New Zealand.
Excellent. Well, I would consider you an expert. You've obviously had I do refer to you as an expert. So, in your opinion, what would you consider one of the biggest areas of concern, particularly in the building and construction industry around asbestos at the moment?
I think knowledge is key. And with knowledge, we have to have education, awareness. All of those are key and founding factors in addressing the wider issue of asbestos and other hazardous materials.
So would you say there is a lack of awareness currently?
I'd have to say so, yeah. And it's something that we know we've been working on. We've got a long way to go. We have made some great leaps and steps forward, but there really is, and the figures speak for themselves. The continual rise and the amount of people that are still exposed and suffering the consequences of asbestos exposure are there for all to see. And something that I've been thinking about more and more is that this latency period that does happen, if the industry has been evolved for 30 years, are the people that are now coming through and showing signs of exposure, are they from original install production of asbestos and hazardous materials, or are they, from another category, as a different wave? We're getting more and more teachers that are being exposed and noted, household renovations, the possible, lesser control in asbestos removal when it comes to demolition works and things like this. These are all areas that really expose people, either knowingly or unknowingly, and certainly, that exposure, it just goes on and on at the moment.
It's interesting you say that, because when we're talking home renovations, I have grave concerns that this year, 2020 is going to go down in the history book. Certainly nothing we ever expected. And I know a lot of people around the world are still suffering the ramifications of COVID-19. But I'm concerned that when people have been in lockdown and they've planned to catch up on things around the house, in 30 years' time, are we going to look back at this time and go, oh, we've got another wave of exposure?
Well, I think from our involvement in the residential market, certainly we've seen an upsurge in requests for asbestos removal, and again with that you get some really good people that have pre-planned and are aware of asbestos, and you get those people that they just haven't given it a thought, and unfortunately for them, they have either started to do removal or refurb work and then come across asbestos or something that they've suspected as being asbestos. Sometimes they've had it tested, sometimes they call us in to take the sample, which we take to a laboratory, and if that's positive, that's positive. At that point, we then will sometimes get a consultant engaged to give us a scope, determine the extent of any possible exposure, and provide costs for remediation. But with that comes some real tragic stories.
Yeah, well, I guess we can cite an example, a story that we were both involved in a couple of years ago, where a poor young mum unwittingly pulled up the vinyl in her kitchen and exposed her and her young children to pretty much raw asbestos.
Yeah, that's true, Joe, and that goes back to the news interview that we did. That was quite a classic one, and something that I wish it was an uncommon event, but unfortunately it becomes common with us, and the backing on that particular type of material, the lino flooring, it's a high content asbestos. It's raw and it's unsealed, and the potential for fibre release and airborne contamination there really is quite huge.
It is a concern. As you know, Reflections runs a support network for sufferers, and you touched on there potentially being a new wave, and I think we can attest to that, because the majority of the people in our support group at the moment are non-occupational exposure, women, and a lot of them to do with home renovations. It is something we need to raise more awareness of and take seriously.
Yeah, definitely. I think, any property really before, the 90s, end of the 90s, 2000 era, people need to be aware that there is certainly a higher risk and likelihood of those properties containing asbestos, as asbestos wasn't generally banned in Australia till 2003. Any concerns prior to any disturbance, call in an expert. There's plenty of laboratories out there. There's plenty of good consultants out there that will come round, do for a few $100s, do a sampling or visual inspection of potential asbestos items that are visible. That doesn't include necessarily intrusive surveys, which again, it's very difficult to for someone doing a refurb until they've actually started the refurb, lifting up the floor, pulling out a wall, to expose potential asbestos there. But you just need to be aware of it. And if at any point during your refurb work, if you come across something that you suspect could be asbestos, if it hasn't been disturbed, leave it well alone. Shut the doors, try and contain it, and call in an expert and get it tested.
Yeah, good advice. Well, Reflections and ANZ Enviro have been partnered together for a couple of years now. And for the big event that we run, Steel Toes and Stilettos, we're going ahead for November this year in Western Australia, in Perth. I'm looking forward to it.
Likewise, yeah. We I know we had our own concerns whether it was actually going to be a non-event this year, but the cards have fallen in our favour, and we're also very much looking forward to it. I know that we've dobbed in a couple of our guys, so hopefully they'll hit the catwalk. It's going to be a great evening.
Yeah. Well, we really appreciate ANZ Enviros and your support, and we look forward to seeing you on the red carpet.